I love horror for a lot of reasons, but today I want to talk about 5 specific tropes that I just can't get enough of. If you're into horror, you're going to want to stick around. What's up, guys? My name's Brandon McNulty. I'm a writer, I'm the author of Bad Parts, and welcome to my writing channel. Last year, I did a video on 5 horror cliches that I absolutely hate, and I had a lot of fun with that video because anytime I get to spend 5-10 minutes shitting on things I hate, it's a good time for me. Today, I'm in a more positive mood, however, and I want to talk about 5 specific horror tropes that I love and cannot get enough of. And just so we're clear, these tropes are common to most horror stories. They're things that if you've only seen a few horror movies, you will still recognize them. And if you've seen a lot of them, you will definitely recognize them. The first horror trope that I love, creative monsters. Emphasis on the word creative because I love it when monsters are something original, something I haven't seen before, because I think that only makes them more terrifying to me. Because anytime you have something that is unknown or something we haven't seen before, or it's capable of any range of possibilities as far as killing people or coming after them or whatever it is, that makes them more exciting. When it comes to original monsters, sometimes they're complex and well thought out. For instance, the xenomorph from Alien has a full life cycle where it starts off as an egg and then it becomes a face hugger, and before long it matures into adulthood. And along the way we learn that it's capable of bleeding acid and it has a mouth inside its mouth. There's so many things to love about this particular monster, and that's why it stood the test of time. But not all monsters need to be super complex to be interesting or original. For instance, in the movie It Follows, the creature in this movie is basically just a ghost, but the way that it terrorizes the kids within this story is what makes it so interesting, because it's passed on like an STD, and that's something that we don't see in stories like this. Number 2, dark character arcs. Dark arcs can make a story really interesting because the majority of stories out there, especially when we're talking about like Hollywood movies and even novels today, they tend to be stories that start off with a character who has a flaw and then they overcome that flaw and they end up winning in the end. And we see that so many times that when we do eventually see a story where it's something like a character starts off and they're in a situation that's kind of rough and they end up making some dark choices that lead them down the path to destruction, or at least the path to becoming like a villain. These can be interesting stories. For instance, take a look at the 2018 movie Upgrade, which is a sci-fi horror movie. Really went under the radar, and it shouldn't have because it's a great movie. But it's about this guy who gets beaten up at the beginning of it, and he loses feeling in all of his limbs. So what they give him is this chip that it's implanted into his brainstem, and it enables a computer program to control his arms and legs for him and basically give him his life back. But the catch is that he has to give control to this data chip, and in order for it to function, he has to again and again give it permission until he keeps giving more and more of himself away to this chip. And it's an interesting story. If you haven't seen it already, definitely check it out. Another great movie with a dark character arc is Midsummer, and this is about a young woman named Danny who's dealing with the brutal death of her family, and she's looking for support from her boyfriend who's really not that into her anymore. And when he and his friends end up going on a trip to Sweden, she tags along with this research trip. They end up getting immersed within this community that is actually a cult, and that actually brings up my number 3 trope. Cults, they just terrify me. I am just absolutely terrified of cults. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I value my individuality. And whenever I watch these movies about people, these outsiders who go to like a small town or a small community, and they get immersed within this culture, and there's something weird going on, and they start buying into it more and more until it eventually pops toward the end. These types of stories, they just unsettle me to my core. I don't know what it is about cults. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that they're real and we see them in our daily lives. I mean, if you take a step back and you ask yourself about all the groups that you're a part of, and you ask yourself like, okay, well, I go to this job and I have to follow these insane rules, these stupid rules, and I go along with it because I want money or I want prestige or I want whatever it is. Those types of things, they make me really connect with the idea of these characters in horror stories who end up joining these cults, whether they're these religious cults or they're believe in whatever it is. I mean, I don't care what it is. Whenever there's a cult and there's something going on, I get freaked out. My number 4 trope, I love it when stories keep me guessing as to whether the threat is realistic or supernatural or even psychological. These types of stories, usually they will start off by putting characters in a situation where maybe they get killed by someone in the dark, or they're killed by some unknown, or we don't see how they get killed. And over the course of the story, we're left to guess, okay, is the thing that killed them, is it a human being, somebody who's realistic, or maybe is it an animal, some kind of, creature in the woods that could be in everyday real life, or is it something supernatural? Is it a monster, or is it even psychological? Is it in the characters' heads? And I love when stories like this pull off that balancing act between, okay, maybe it's just a real person, oh, then maybe not, maybe it's actually a ghost, or it's some kind of supernatural entity, or no, it's probably some psycho who's just coming after these people. I mean, when there's that back and forth and they keep you in suspense until the very end, I love it. I can't get enough of it. And actually, one video game I was playing recently called Until Dawn. I'm kind of late to the party on this game. It came out in 2014, but I played it recently, and it's about this group of teenagers. They stay at this cabin in the woods, which is a pretty generic setup, but the execution of the story was just amazing because you're wondering early on, okay, what is the creature? We're seeing through the eyes of the creature at certain points when it's making its kill, or is it a creature? Is it a human being? Could it be something else? Is it some kind of sci-fi technology? What's going on? And it's back and forth, and you're constantly wondering what is out there. Is it this? Is it that? Are there multiple villains? If you're keeping me in suspense like that, I'm on board. And my number 5 horror trope, I love death. And yes, this sounds kind of morbid, but hear me out on this. I love death within the context of horror stories because the horror genre can explore death in ways that other genres simply cannot. For instance, if you're watching a comedy or a romance, there's probably not going to be death in there at all, and if there is, it's probably going to be downplayed or pushed off to the side. And if you're watching epic fantasy, usually death is like a rite of passage. You have like a mentor character who gets killed off, like Obi-Wan or Gandalf, and in the end, Luke or Frodo has to pick up their torch and prove that they learned from them. But within the horror genre, death can be explored in so many different ways, whether it's death as punishment, or death as a burden, or death as a mystery, or what is death, or how does it relate to life, or there's so many possibilities that you can work with, and you can work with it because the audience for horror movies or horror stories in general, they are typically more accepting of death because they see it so much, and because you see it so much, you can see creative takes on it, and some of these can be pretty brutal, but they can also be important to us. For instance, in the 2018 movie Hereditary, this is a movie about the death of a child and how the parents respond to it, and this is a situation that nobody wants to go through in real life. But within the context of a fictional work, we can get invested in characters and we can go through the emotions with them. And we can prepare ourselves for different situations in our own lives and ask us, how would we respond to situations like these? And is there a right way to respond to them? And is there a very wrong way? And oftentimes these stories can teach us about things like death and about how to overcome the problem or the burden of it. And in general, horror stories are about characters who face their fears and grapple with them and try to overcome them. And what makes the genre so powerful is that you can place a character in the darkest spot imaginable and still enable them to fight their way out of it and again see the light. And that's why I valued the trope of death so much, because yes, it's destruction, yes, it's despair, but at the same time, it enables us to tell stories where we go to the darkest spot and still live to tell about it. So I hope this helps. And if you're interested in a story that covers a lot of these tropes I discussed today, check out my novel Bad Parts. I will link it in the description below. It's about a guitarist who breaks her left hand and ends up cutting a deal with an organ-swapping demon. It's a ton of fun. I had a blast writing it, and it won contests like Pitch Wars and Rev Pit. And if you haven't read it already, I know some of my subscribers picked it up on day one, but if you haven't checked it out already, definitely give it a look. I think it's something you'll love if you're into the horror genre. Question of the day, what is your favorite horror trope? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to check out my other videos. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for me. Share this video with a friend if you don't mind. And as always, remember to keep on writing.